And that was the culture. So you're really talking about a company culture of people using that error account. And you saw it and then you used it. And so again, just to clarify for people, normally in the course of a day, you would take an order from a salesperson in Tokyo, you would execute and pass that risk on to the client.
Yeah.
Barings wouldn't typically have a proprietary trading account where you would say punt and take positions yourself.
Against the client? No.
No. Or even for your own bound, you wouldn't necessarily.
Oh, no, we did. Yeah, Barings did.
They did sometimes. But your job wasn't to do that.
No.
So when you had a position, it went into this error account because technically you weren't supposed to be trading these futures on your own behalf.
Right.
And now this account, the 5/8, why was it called that account? And maybe tell us a bit about that account.
Well, it's quite a simple story. The number 8 is perceived to be lucky in the Asian culture. And so, we needed a bit of luck, and 5/8 seemed like a good idea. And there's no real logic to it other than that. I have been told subsequently in events in Hong Kong and places like that 5/8 swaps it around, becomes unlucky. I don't know. I'm not a great believer in any of this sort of stuff, but that was the reason. It was, one of the locals told me that 8 was a lucky number, so it became the 5/8 account.
Okay, so that day started off with about $10,000 down. How did this proceed and what happened next?
I can't give you the exact numbers.
Okay.
But,
were you trying to protect this employee as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Because they would have been fired. She would have been sacked.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely in my background. Working class. That loyalty is an important thing for me, and always has been, and still is today. I'd hate to put myself back into one of those dilemmas, in 2019 or 2020, because. I'd like to think I've matured to the level where you would, you'd castigate or admonish or put their head on the chopping block. But I'm not really that. I'm not that callous or I don't know what word I would use for it. But I'm not really that person.
And this is exactly what a young runner will do. They'll make a mistake like that. I mean, I'm guessing.
I mean, she left. She left a couple of days later.
Okay.
Because she couldn't put up with the pressure
right.
of the role, and because all of this volume was moving into Singapore. It was a real stressful period, and it was relentless. The circuit breakers would be in on a Monday, on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday, and so all of this volume was kicking through. And it was just a very testing time. But in terms of errors, as you said, people can put in a buy order. It should be a sell order. You have to make the customer good, because somebody would have said to the customer, "You're filled,"
on a recorded line, and they're done.
And so you have to make the customer good. Plus, you've got the trade the wrong way, so it's already twice the size against you. And so, but those are the things. And that's why error accounts were used, because, I might be sat here trading with you. Well, we'd be standing, but, there'd be 3 or 4 people fairly close to your head. And you're like, as much as I'm doing a signal to you, the person right behind you might think I'm trading with them as well. So you'd get a lot of, and that's why the matching process becomes so important. So that if there is a mismatch, somebody has to be made good, either I'm wrong or the guy behind you is wrong, and that's sometimes where the argument comes into it. And
right. So these error accounts were made specifically because these errors were common in that human system where, and then just again, I mean, I wasn't there, but I can imagine, because I've been on a busy trading floor. I mean, for people who don't understand, first of all, there's a lot of people there. There's a lot of yelling. There's a lot of orders coming in. There's a lot of confusion. And now your systems can't actually reconcile these prices. So now everybody has Google Sheets today. But imagine the most antiquated version of that on a computer system that breaks down to where by 4 a.m. the next day, you still don't know whether something was bought or sold with a specific person. So you're dealing, and then the next day you got to be ready to trade again.
Oh, you're back on the trading floor at 7 in the next morning.
Right.
I mean, the Japanese market's open at 8, so there's no stopping.
Yeah. When I was a junior trader at Bankers Trust, I had to do something called a tear up. So I had to like undo a trade that was on the system with some airline company. And I was like all of 22 years old and I was stressed out, right? And I was trying to piece this old trade together and putting all the cash flows and checking all the mercantile exchange. And the salesman, an MD at the time, came over and said, I want you to put money in this trade. As in, I want to make a couple $100,000 when we get him out of this trade. Right. And I went through and I did everything and I tried, and my senior guy was too busy and he was like, just do it. He was yelling at me or he threw a phone at me or something. And I gave the guy the price and he got the client on the phone and he executed, and he came over and he said, how much money did we make? And I priced it in and I realized that we had actually lost some money. Right. And he yelled at me in front of everybody on that floor and said, that's coming out of your bonus, motherfucker. And ran back. Now this guy later, his name was Kevin Hudson. What's up, Kevin? Was later, part of the trial and got indicted with Procter and Gamble. But that's the kind of pressure that's on. And when you're a junior kid, you can make mistakes like that. And that's just kind of what happens. And these things can get out of hand and things can be rid. So you rode this position a little bit.
Yep. Yeah.
And then roughly what happened over the next few months?
I mean, in the beginning, there were people weren't checking what was going on. So I remember I did a dinner many years ago where somebody stood up and they said something really quite clever. They said, "What I engaged, I was supposed to be doing a bit of arbitrage trading or it evolved into arbitrage trading between the two exchanges." But they said what I actually did was organisational arbitrage because I saw the weaknesses in the system and took advantage of them. I think it's a great analogy, but it's not really what happened. It wasn't a case of seeing that there were weaknesses in different places. I really was experiencing that minute by minute and day by day. So, from the first moment that a trade went into the 5/8 account, I used to do position checks at Morgan Stanley. If your positions didn't agree, you didn't trade, your positions were agreed by 7 o'clock in the morning, nobody ever did a position check. Okay, but so I expected a knock on the door every single minute of every single day. Somebody might, the phone would ring and I think, God, somebody's exposed me, and you would be constantly on your nerves throughout those first few weeks and months. Obviously the position isn't improving, market's still going against you, you might cut it. You've then got to conceal a loss in the 5/8
right.
account.
So you were kind of long DK and it's dropping down.
Yeah.
And then if you cut the loss, then you realize it and then everyone knows you're busted because it's hard to hide that loss.
And they should.
Right.
They should.
Yeah.
But what happened then is that the only day that the accountant in Singapore would look at it, so we had a different balance sheet. So that it was Baring Futures was different to Baring Securities Singapore. So we had a separate balance sheet. And the only day that the accountant would incorporate the futures balance sheet into the securities business was the last day of the month. Okay, so that's the only day that you had to worry about the 5/8 account balance.
Right.
So on the last day of the month, the 5/8 account balance had to be zero because she did one check and one check only. We only had a Tokyo account and a London account. She'd add the two together and compare that to the account balance line. So very, very superficial, no quality testing. Last day of the month, 5/8 account balance had to be zero. So there was only one way I could do that. There was a commission income account, which was for some of the give up trades that we were doing at the time. So I would debit the commission income account and credit the 5/8 account. Very as much as some of what I did during that time was described as complex, I can't find any of it. It was very, very basic and just trying to survive for the next period, that whether that's a day, 2 days, a week, or a month. And your horizon gets a little bit longer as you go through the process, and you start to realize that people aren't really checking what they should be checking, and the balance sheet was the first one of those. So that was the first real. So there were no position checks being done. You could see that on a daily basis, and then the accountant is only looking at that account balance line. So
once a month, and you figured out how to just put it in another account once you checked.
It was just a debit credit. You debit one account, you credit the other, which is okay for a period of time until the loss exceeds the balance in the commission income account, which it did in about September 1992. Okay. So there was a total of $5 million worth of losses, and there was no way of hiding it. At the same time, we've got an external audit, so it's the year-end audit, September 92. One of the big fours coming in to look at the accounts. For me, this is a hurdle. Okay, as much as internally things weren't great from a reconciliation, from an overseeing perspective or a control perspective. Now I've got a professional body coming in that are going to look at our books and records. This is it for me. You know, September 1992. That's it. It's not going any further.